Hello, everyone. Uh, Thank you all for coming today. My name is David Ginovar, and DSI core member, and today I have the pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Danny Oppenheimer, professor of Carnegie Mellon University with joint appointment in psychology and decision science. Dr. Oppenheimer's spanned judgment, decision-making, metacognition, learning, and causal reasoning, with application ranging from charitable giving and educational to consumer behavior and electoral outcomes. He's an author of more than 50 peer-reviewed publications and several books, including Psychology, the Comic Book Introduction. Known for combining scientific rigor with humor, he has received multiple awards for research, teaching, and even comedy, including the Ig Nobel Science Humor Award, which honors awards that first make people laugh and then made them think. He has also experienced zero gravity firsthand, and he doesn't recommend. His talk today is AI and education, explore how a student can use AI productively in educational environment, how scaffolding can prevent uh, counterproductive habit, and how this insight inform curriculum design in AI-enabled classroom. Please join me to welcoming Dr. Danny Oppenheimer today.
Okay, wonderful. I assume my screen is working and everybody can hear me, and all that's good. Okay, I'm seeing a nod from David, so that's a good sign. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Ig Nobel Prize, it's not the Nobel Prize, it's a science humor award, not a science quality award. But it is, of course, still the most prestigious thing that's on my CV. So I have it listed at the very top. And I was at a university, I won't bother mentioning which one, and they asked for my CV as publicity purposes. And I sent them my CV, and the publicity officer decided that the IG part of Ig Nobel Prize must be a typo, because that's the sort of typo that a Nobel Prize winner might make on their CV. Anyway, regardless, they thought that it might be a typo, so I got to campus, and plastered all over campus was welcoming Nobel Prize winner Danny Oppenheimer. And I got into a room completely full. Everybody wanted to see a Nobel Prize winner, and I had to explain to them that no, I was not a Nobel Prize winner, but maybe I was sort of funny. Anyway, I think it's a great experience, a story, because people talk about how AIs hallucinate supposed facts, and they do. But humans also hallucinate facts. Humans do amazing things. We also make mistakes. AI does amazing things. It makes mistakes. The question is, can we figure out how to use AI to scaffold human mistakes and prevent us from doing the wrong things? So what we want to be able to do is figure out a way to integrate human and artificial intelligence to exploit the strengths of both and cover for the weaknesses of both. And so I'm excited to be here to talk to you a little bit about some of my experiences in research in AI and education. And during this talk, if there are questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or the questions. David's going to be monitoring that. At various points, I'll try to pause and open for questions, but I'm happy to talk and have more conversational if that's what people want. Okay, so I am having a little bit of trouble. Oh, there we go. There we go. Good, good, good. So in my mind, AI is a tool, and like any other tool, it can be used well or it can be used poorly. So using tools changes the way that we think and the way we act, the way we behave, and these changes aren't necessarily inherently better or worse, but they could be better or worse for certain purposes. So if we were together in person, it would allow you to see my body language. I would be able to see your body language. You'd see my gestures better. You'd be better off at hearing the prosody and tone of voice and sarcasm. If I were to point at something, you'd know what I was pointing at. Right now I'm pointing at something, but no one there has any idea what it is. And I could see if you were smiling or frowning or even there, all of which would help me give a talk that responds to your reactions to my talk. If I sent an email, it doesn't have those features, but it does create a permanent record of the conversation, and it allows time for me to edit and proofread what I say, which allows me to avoid embarrassing mistakes. And depending on my goals, either might be better, right? So in the above image, if you're, sorry about that. In the above image, if your goal is to strain the veggies from the soup, well, the tool there is great. But if your goal is to eat the broth, then the tool is not great. And that's true of AI as well. It all depends on your goals. So today I'm going to be giving some suggestions on how to fruitfully apply AI to education. But I want to remind you that there are many goals that educators have for their students, and how effective a particular application of AI will be depends on the nature of your goals and the nature of your students and the nature of your classroom and all of these things. These aren't these things I'm going to be talking about aren't off-the-shelf solutions. They need to be adapted to your specific circumstances. But hopefully they will still be helpful to you as you try to figure out how to make that work. Okay, so I want to start with a challenge. This is a graph that comes from Pan and Bjork 2020. And what they did is they asked people to determine whether they thought massed or spaced learning would be more effective. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, mass learning is when you learn one type of content all at once and then switch to something else. So if you spend 3 hours studying your math, and then 3 hours studying your history, and then 3 hours studying your psychology, etc. So you mass it all together. Spacing is when you mix it up. So you maybe spend 20 minutes studying math, then 20 minutes studying history, then 20 minutes studying psych, then back to math, then back to history, and then back to psych. So you mix it all up. And when they ask people, which do they think helped them more, which is a better strategy for learning, you can see here that some 60%, 65% of students think that they learn better when they mass information. And that's because it's easier to do it when you're massed. It feels easier because you're studying math and you don't have to engage in task switching, and you don't have to upload into your mind relevant things. So everybody likes mass learning, and most people think it's going to be more helpful. But when they actually have people engage in either mass learning or space learning, what they see is that people do a lot better when they use space learning than when they do mass learning. And this is a finding that is just meant as an example of a general problem, which is that students often don't have great intuitions about what is the best way to study or learn. They often have poor metacognition. They don't know how much they've learned. They don't know how well they'll remember material that they have learned. So if they learn it now, they may not remember it in the future. They don't know how much they're going to forget. They don't know the optimal strategies. And all of these things are exacerbated when it comes to AI, because most students don't naturally know how to use AI to help them study. And that's because AI is a new tool and they haven't had a chance to learn it, and it's not necessarily intuitive. So given this, students who use LLM for writing assignments will often just sort of copy and paste the LLM output rather than actually writing themselves. They simply, they simply use the LLM and offload the task rather than using the LLM to assist them in the task. And the result of this is that LLM users become overly reliant on their tools. If I'm not doing the process, I'm not learning how to do the process. And so over time, I forget how to do the process. And so what ends up happening is that people who don't use LLMs often learn better. So ChatGPT can lead to higher scores while it's being used. And that's not surprising, right? LLMs can make me a better writer while I'm using them to write. But sometimes studies have shown that when you do subsequent tests later, people forget how to, or they haven't learned as much, and so they don't do as well. There's a lot of studies that show this sort of pattern, and it's all the same. Sometimes in writing, sometimes in math. LLMs help you do better at one point, but then you don't learn as much. And so when you no longer have the LLMs, you are undercut. And this goes back to the old adage: if you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. And we can think the same thing of robots, right? So if AI does the work for the student or gives the students the answers, AI impedes learning. But if the AI gives the student information that they need to do the work, or is able to scaffold the student to support them in doing the work and overcome bottlenecks, then AI can facilitate learning. And so an example of this, this is coming from Kumar and his colleagues, is if you look specifically at this middle and the right elements of this figure here, what you can see is that they gave people math problems, and they either asked them to try to do the math problems without help and then gave them LLM help, or they just gave them the answer and then gave them LLM help. And then they took away the LLM and asked them to do the test again. And what you can see is if you can see the answer, you get the answer right. That is not surprising. It's sort of helpful to be given the answer when you're trying to get it right. But what's interesting is if you are given the answer just flat out, you don't learn very much. And that's true regardless of whether or not you're using a specialized LLM, a standard LLM, or even just given the answers. But if you are asked to practice first and you're given just try this task, try to do it without help, and then the LLM helps you, you perform pretty well on the tests. And this is sort of a guiding principle behind how LLMs can be used, which is that instead of allowing students to just offload to the LLMs, what we want is for the students to engage with the task and only have the LLMs come in to assist when the students are struggling. So I'm going to now describe a scaffolded assignment that I created for one of my classes. This is a class called Human Intelligence and Human Stupidity. And this class is a general ed class for Carnegie Mellon. And we decided that we wanted to get them involved with LLMs. We wanted them to be using them, but we were worried that if we just allowed them to use LLMs in any way, in an unscaffolded way, what they would do is just give the assignment to an LLM and they wouldn't learn anything. So what we did was we start with the assignment having three parts. First, we ask them to formulate and defend an argument in response to a prompt, and they're not allowed to use an LLM for that. They have to come up with the idea on their own. But then, and a lot of assignments in a lot of classes have this element: write a response to a prompt, write an essay, write a short response, whatever. But then we add to that a new element. So we tell them they are required to take what they have written and give it to an LLM of their choice, Bard, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, and ask it for feedback. We also tell them that they will be evaluated on the quality of their prompt engineering. So we're going to ask them to submit their prompt and that they used to get feedback, and also they have to submit what the LLM said as feedback. And we are going to evaluate the quality of the feedback elicited from the LLM. So we say if the LLM says, hey, you missed a comma here or there, you're not going to get very many points for that. But if the LLM criticizes the deeper parts of your argument and figures out problems with the logical structure or gives counter arguments, that we will give you more credit for. We also give them documentation on how to use LLMs in case they don't have that, so that they have something to go by. Finally, they get back this LLM feedback and they have to respond to the LLM feedback, either through a rebuttal if they disagree with the LLM, or they can update their original argument if they were persuaded by the LLM. And so they have to give a response to the feedback. So that forces them to engage with the feedback that they've gotten. So it's not just having LLM write a prompt for them. They write their own prompt. They get feedback from the LLM, and then they have to engage with that feedback. So they can't just read the feedback. They have to actually write a response to it. So we had this very simple intervention. The students are going to complete this assignment 5 times over a semester. At the end of the semester, they're going to fill out affective and metacognitive scales. Affective are things like how useful, challenging, and engaging are these assignments. The metacognitive is how much do you feel like you've learned. Then we're going to have TAs, teaching assistants, who are blind to the experiment and experimental condition, evaluating the students on how their answers are, and that's going to be on all 3 of the dimensions. One is how was their original writing. 2 was how well did they prompt engineer the LLM, and 3 is how well did they incorporate the rebuttals and or incorporate the arguments and respond to the arguments. Finally, we're going to have research assistants who are blind to the experiment going through all of the student responses and coding them for how engaged the students were. Did the student show a rebuttal, and did the student show acceptance of any of the arguments of the LLM? So we're trying to get a sense of, is this actually getting the sort of thinking we're hoping for? So we can do a variety of things here. One thing we can do is we can just look at sentiment analysis. So we have an open-ended prompt at the end of the study where we ask people, hey, tell us what you think about these assignments. And they can comment on any element of the intervention they'd like to. And we did a full sentiment analysis. And as you can see, it's overwhelmingly positive with some neutral. And there were 0 students who had a negative reaction to this. The second thing we did was we asked them on a -5 to 5 Likert scale how useful, challenging, engaging, and enjoyable the experience was. And 0 is neutral at this. And overall, the students liked this assignment. This was something that students enjoyed doing. So that's nice. But it's enjoyment. We want our students to enjoy what they're doing. We want them to have fun in learning, but that ultimately is not necessarily indicative of learning. So let's move on to some other dependent measures. Another thing we can do is we can ask them how much self-efficacy they have developed. So, for example, I can effectively ask a question that would be get generative AI to answer the way I want, or I can evaluate the quality of generative AI outputs. And what we see here is that pre-intervention and post-intervention, we're seeing nice improvement across people's confidence levels. A 0% is I'm 0% confident, 100% is I'm 100% confident, that they would be able to effectively use prompt engineering. So we're not just training them on the writing, and we're not just training them on the content of the material in the class, but we're also training them on prompt engineering, which will make them more effective at using AI in the future. Third thing here is we asked them, this is a qualitative analysis of what the students were doing during this assignment. Were they just copying and pasting, or were they actually engaged in the interaction with the AI? And remember, what we know from previous research is that when people use AI in interactive ways, they can scaffold them. But if they just copy and paste, if they just offload to the AI, they don't learn as much. And what we see here is that over 90% of the responses show signs of active reflection. And what's also interesting is that students both rebut and accept elements of the AI's comments. So the AI is going to have multiple points, and your average student is going to be both rebutting some points and accepting other points, because otherwise you wouldn't get numbers that high. Which means that it's a high evidence of reflection, and also that they're not just blindly saying, I accept everything the AI said, or I reject everything the AI said, but they're point by point considering, and sometimes they like what the AI has to say, and sometimes they don't. And either way, they're learning to think about it and respond in an argumentative way, helping their, create better argument structure. And now you may still be saying, okay, but that's qualitative. They're doing the right things. Does it work? And the answer here is we have here from assignment 1 to assignment 5, student scores. They max out at 3 on the opinion, what they were writing originally, the quality of their prompt engineering, and the quality of their response to the prompt engineering. And what you see here is that performance improves. So it's worth noting the first thing here is opinion. So that's just, this is unscaffolded. When they're writing their opinions, they have not yet used GPT. The fact that we are seeing increases in the quality of their original writing means that there is transfer of their knowledge, that when they go through this multiple times, they are now able to more effectively express their opinion and anticipate LLM comments than when they started this set of assignments. So that's why it's nice and high there. The prompt engineering, they are actively getting better at. They thought they were, they actually are. And they're also getting better at responding to the LLMs and coming up with more effective arguments in their structures. So all of those things are hopefully encouraging about the nature of this set of tasks. So I'm going to take a second to stop there, and maybe I'll pop into screen view so you can see my face instead of that's not helping. Let's see, I'm going to stop sharing now, and so you can actually see my face. And if there are any questions now, it's a good time to take them, and then I'll jump back in a moment to screen sharing. I actually don't know if there are any questions.
We don't have a question yet. So,
well, I
wait.
shouldn't have jumped out. Oh, wait, okay.
Please throw any questions that you have into the Q&A section.
Okay, I am going to jump back in then. Assuming that's, yeah, okay. So I'm going to jump back into throwing this back at you. Hold on a second. It'll take me one moment as I get the tech working. Advanced portion screen share.
While you try to make it work, there was the first question here. What did the student think of this LLM experiment?
The students knew that they were in an experiment, and that is because I had to get consent from them. But I got consent on the first day of class, and I think that by the time the first assignment was due, none of the students remembered that they were actually being evaluated on this. We did ask them, of course, to fill out these surveys, but as a regular, I do that on all of my assignments because I always am trying to get feedback on what's working and what's not. So I don't think they necessarily... if we were to ask them, what did you think about the study? I think the most common response would be, what study?
Okay.
All right. Okay. So, oh my goodness, my slides were a little out of order, so I'm jumping to here first. I want to talk about another intervention that's doing the same sorts of things. The goal here, again, is to scaffold students' learning. And so what we're going to do is we're creating this new tool. We call it Socratic Book. What this is any student who wants to could always just ask GPT at any point to help it with anything. So, if the student wants to know about operant conditioning, it can just go to GPT or Bard or Gemini or whatever and just say, tell me about operant conditioning. And they would get some information from that. The problem is that's not scaffolded. And students would then be required to ask the right questions in the right way to get the right outcomes. And as we've noted, students don't always have the best instincts for how to do that. So, what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new thing, a new tool called a Socratic Book. And I can talk to you more about that during Q&A if you're interested in how the technical details work. But what we do here is professors set learning goals and provide primary sources. So we upload any articles that we think are important. The LLM is constrained that it must go to those articles first before it can go to the internet at large or even its database. And so we give a set of learning goals, and then the bot holds a Socratic dialogue with a student. So the student can it gives the learning goals to the student, and the student can ask questions of the bot, and the bot answers. And the bot is trying to make sure all the learning goals are met. It is trained to do that, but it customizes to each student individually. So if a student is understanding the material well, it can go faster. If the student is not understanding it, it can slow down. If a student has a particular interest in a particular hobby or whatever, the bot can give examples that align with the student's interests. Those hobbies will not be scaffolded. So if a student's like, I really like hockey, explain hockey. I haven't given any primary sources on hockey, but I don't care if the bot messes up and says Wayne Gretzky is, good at hockey or whatever. Maybe he is, I guess. But this is a Minnesota talk. I should know my hockey examples before I talk about hockey. But regardless, what I care about is operant conditioning in that case. And so it's paying attention to this, and students basically, it's tracking whether students have seen content and also whether they have mastery of content based on the goals that we've already set. So it also can send feedback to the professor, telling us both at a student level and a class level whether there are spots of misunderstanding or confusion. And so that's another way to do it. But let's just quickly show you what this looks like. So this is a screenshot of the Socratic Book. I was going to do a live demo, but the tech of using that with Zoom overwhelmed me. So we're just going to use a screenshot. This is classical and operant conditioning. You can see it starts by telling them what the learning goals are. It offers them which goal would you like to start with. They can actually ask anything else. And you have an opportunity, you can enter in the chat box, I'd like to start with LG1 or whichever order they'd like. And on the side here, you can see it has a progress key. And of course, this is a new window. So there's no coverage, which means they haven't seen any of these concepts yet. And there is no mastery because they haven't attempted to show mastery of any of the concepts. When they start getting feedback, here's what this looks like, a few questions. Wait a minute, that's the same question, isn't it? Yeah, this is a few questions in. So at this point, it had been giving me feedback. I don't know how many people here are psychologists or know about operant conditioning, or sorry, classical conditioning. Don't worry about it if you don't. It's not actually germane to understanding this example, but it had given me basic concepts and asked about the neuroscience of it. It told me about long-term potentiation, so I asked it about long-term potentiation, which is the neural mechanism that underlines operant or classical conditioning. It now gives me some information on it, and now it tracks that it has covered that material. It tells me what it's covered. It gives examples of what examples it used to tell me what it's covered, and it also has started in our back and forth. It has been monitoring what questions I ask and giving me questions that I have to answer, and then giving me a measure of my mastery based on that. So all of this is just tracked, and it's a conversation. Now, one of the interesting things here is that on one hand, this could be great because it it's individualized to the student, to that student's interest. If the student has more questions, they can ask deeper questions about the material. If they don't understand something, they can ask for new examples of it. On the other hand, unlike a normal textbook, it is possible for a student to just not read certain elements of it. Because, well, I guess you could do that with a normal textbook too, huh? You could just not read it. But I guess the point is a normal textbook, at least there's someone who went through and said, here is the order in which things will be given. This is a natural order. It makes sense as an order. But here every student is going to be seeing an individualized lesson plan. So it is possible that a student will go through it in a way that is not optimal. we try to scaffold it so it doesn't. We give these learning goals to give the scaffolding. We monitor what they're learning. And so when they haven't covered something, it gives a suggestion. But of course, this is a very new tool. So we wanted to test the effectiveness of it. And we had 150 students. They came in to a lab setting in this case, and they either used a Socratic textbook or a standard intro psych textbook. I'm redacting the name of the intro psych textbook because the textbook company was nice enough to give it to us on that condition. But we had a chapter on learning. And what we did is we took the learning goals from the chapter on learning that was in the intro psych textbook, and we fed that to the Socratic book. And then we also went through and gave it the references that the textbook on learning had used. So we went and found the original references and gave it to them. And then the participants were told to spend a half hour studying the material for a test. And then we went to the test bank from the actual textbook, and we randomly chose only multiple choice questions because that would allow us to grade it more easily. And so we wanted to see how the things would do. The AIs were blind to the specific questions that were asked. Obviously, the test questions were written to the textbook's content. So this is a pretty conservative measure. What we found, and this is going to probably be not the most impressive thing in the world, but those bars are not significantly different from each other. That the Socratic textbook and the standard textbook, people scored about the same. This could be viewed as disappointing because they didn't do better with the AI, but what's interesting is that they didn't do better with the textbook. And a lot of people who say, hey, using AI is hurting learning because students are just offloading, we're able to match that of a textbook. But we're able to do more than match that of a textbook because we match that of a textbook with the textbook having an advantage because we used the textbook's test bank. And the Socratic book didn't know what would be tested. And students still did just as well with the Socratic book as they did on the textbook. There are some interesting things that come out of this, though, which is that some students will ask questions like, tell me what I need to know to pass this test, and then go rush through it and do as quickly as possible. Those students don't do very well. There are other students who really engage with the Socratic book and go back and forth and ask more questions, and those students do better than on the standard textbook. So there seems to be a strong relationship between how students use the Socratic book and the standard textbook. The Socratic book scaffolds them and does help them use it right. But at some level, there is motivational effort that if the student is not interested in engaging and learning with it, the book can't force them to. I will say, though, that students did tend to feel like they liked it more. Here's a confidence and knowledge. This is actually a scaffold of confidence and liking of this is an amalgam of confidence and liking. They tended to like the Socratic book. They tended to feel like it was helping them. And so they were motivated in the Socratic book method. But still, it is worth noting that we did not beat the standard book in the very first iteration hereof, but we're still working on that. And it is nice to see, given how many people are afraid of AI learning, thinking that it will cause hallucinations, that students will offload, that it actually doesn't seem to show any disadvantage compared to more standard approaches. All right. David, are there any questions now, or should I continue on to some sort of other methods in education that I have prepared?
We don't have any questions so far, so I think,
Great.
but
I'm going to keep moving then.
please, everyone, feel free to throw any questions that you have. We can read it at the end or through the presentation.
Okay, great. So one thing that we've talked about already that I just want to reiterate is that students learn best when they are actively engaged in the material. And in particular, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that when students are given test questions, when they test themselves, that is particularly helpful for their learning. Rather than passive studying. So this is a study by Roediger and Karpicki, where what they did is they had students study material 4 times, or study the material 3 times and then get a practice test on it. And then they would study the material once and given 3 practice tests on it. And ultimately they were given a final test. Now, it's worth noting here that in all cases, they were not given feedback on how they had done in the previous tests. So what we see here is if they're cramming, it's 5 minutes before the actual exam. Study, 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 that does the best. They learn 80% of the material, and 5 minutes later, they're still remembering it. If they study 3 times and are tested once, that's not as good as studying 4 times. And if they study once and are tested 3 times, that's not as good as studying either. But if you bring them back 1 week later, and this is between conditions, so you either do it 5 minutes later or 1 week later, you can see that those who were studying remembered a lot 5 minutes later, but don't remember very much at all a week later. Those who got tested once remember considerably more a week later, and those who were basically only getting tested remembered even more a week later. So for long-term retention, we know that this sort of active engagement and forced recall or retention is really helpful. And one of the things that LLMs can do is provide an endless source of practice questions. This isn't necessarily the way that students would naturally use it, but if you can push them to, you can do this. So I asked LLMs, this is ChatGPT, and I asked it to give me questions, practice questions on operant conditioning and learning theory, which was what the Socratic book was on. And in less than 5 minutes, it gave me 100 example questions. And the prompt I used was generate practice questions to help students understand and get feedback on principles of operant conditioning. And it gave me 100 questions in less than 5 minutes, which means that students who need to practice the material can get an endless source of practice. And if they do that, that will help them learn. It's much better than just going through the textbook over and over and over and rereading it and hoping that it'll stick. You can also ask them the AI to generate scenarios to help learn. So this one, I asked them, generate scenarios to help students learn to identify independent versus dependent variables in psychological studies. And it creates a variety of these. And again, 100 scenarios can be made in less than 5 minutes. And students who are struggling to understand this concept can get a lot of practice and feedback right away. Now, one of the things about this is most students don't think to do it. They just ask the question and read it and don't actually think to do it. So you have to tell them, use AI to generate practice questions. The other thing is that AI does not always generate great practice questions. So we've created a GPT guide for practice questions, a student guide, where we tell them they generate questions and answers quickly, but the quality can vary. Some questions will be excellent, others may be confusing, ambiguous or miscalibrated. And then we tell them, ask for many questions and keep the best. Don't stop at 1 or 2 questions, generate a batch, say 10, and focus on the 3 and 4 that seem clear, challenging, and tied to what you're studying. Critique, don't just answer. Part of learning is evaluating the questions themselves. Ask, is this question clear and specific? Could there be multiple correct answers? Does the answer match the question? Is the difficulty level appropriate? If you notice problems, that's not wasted time. It's sharpening your ability to recognize what makes good exam questions. So you should evaluate the questions GPT asks before looking at the answers it generates. This document is longer. We have a bunch of principles. I'm happy to share it with anyone who's interested. But the key here is that you have to teach your students how to use GPT this way. You can't rely on them to just know how to do it. But if they use it to generate questions, they become much more effective at generating questions. And once they can generate questions, they start learning much more efficiently. You can also use GPT to help you. I know this isn't supposed to be part technically of what I'm supposed to be talking about, but I'm excited about this. And two things in particular I'm excited about that have been really helpful to me. The first of which is exit tickets. So I have students at the end of every class spend 2 to 3 minutes giving me an exit ticket where they write what they learned about in class and have an opportunity to ask questions about anything that they've learned about in class. And those get submitted, and I use an LLM to evaluate those. So I have hundreds of students in my class. I don't have the time or bandwidth to read everything and synthesize the common themes and misunderstandings. But GPT is really good at summarizing large amounts of information. So I give GPT anonymized student input and ask it to summarize and synthesize what they're saying. And then I will get back qualitative reports on sentiment, whether or not they liked the lecture or not, how well they understood the lecture content, whether or not they're thinking at different levels of Bloom's taxonomy about the content, and it will just summarize all of this for me and give me what percentage of students are in each category. It will also spit back to me the names of any, well, if you can have it. If you are using it anonymously, that's great. You can also have it in a non-anonymous form if you have a private GPT server, which I do, give you the names of the students who are struggling and are not getting it so that I can intervene on those students. You can have it, you can train GPT to think the way your students are thinking and then query the average student with whatever questions you want to get insight into where the students may be struggling or material that they find particularly interesting. Some of this is a little more sophisticated, but I predict that off-the-shelf products of this nature will be available in a year or two at most. And we're already using these sorts of things and using it to understand how students are doing. We are also now experimenting with having the AI immediately give students feedback on a 1 to 5 scale of how good their responses are. And we are fine-tuning that as we go along to see if we can get the students to get good feedback right away, where I teach them something, they respond to it, and they get feedback on whether they understand it immediately before they've forgotten that. So that's can be really cool. I have more on that I can talk about. I have slides in the Q&A section if anyone's interested. Another place that's really useful is to use GPT to identify places where your lecture might be confusing. So I have often now given my lecture notes to GPT and say, hey, what are students going to find confusing here? And GPT will flag things where it says this transition might be rough, they might not understand it, or here is an ambiguous thing that you're doing, or this example, they don't understand Seinfeld. They were born after Seinfeld stopped, so they won't know what that is. So they will give me, GPT will give me useful feedback on my lectures before I give them, so I can update and improve my lectures beforehand and even after. It'll also flag bottleneck concepts. So I found that to be helpful. You can also use AI to reduce administrative burdens. It is trivial to train a chatbot on your syllabus. You can then have your syllabus, you can put a chat window into Canvas or whatever your software is. And then students, instead of having, if you're anything like me, I get a lot of emails from students who are asking me about course policies, and that is annoying because it's in the syllabus, and I used to respond, it's in the syllabus, and then the students would be annoyed with me for not responding to them, and it was a big cycle of annoyance. But now I have a syllabot, and the students actually prefer to interact with the syllabot than to talk to me, and they just ask questions of the syllabot, and it tells them what the course policies are. And you can just use off-the-shelf GPT and upload your syllabus into this to get those questions, and this saves you time, and students get immediate feedback instead of having to wait for you to write them back, which they like, and you probably will like. All right, the final thing I'm going to talk about before we go to Q&A is about AI and academic integrity. Students, a lot of people are really worried. If I use AI to try to facilitate my student learning, then students might cheat. And if they cheat, then I won't be able to evaluate them fairly, and we don't like that. But I want to highlight something. This screenshot is taken from a company that blatantly advertises online that it will have professional writers write essays for students. I have been on campuses when I visited campuses and wandered around and seen advertisements from graduate students saying that they will write undergraduate papers for them in their area of expertise in order to make their stipends are pretty small. It gives them a little bonus money. So like this is not new with AI, right? Students have always been able to cheat in largely undetectable ways. And so we know that there are ways to deal with this that aren't based on just enforcement, right? There are things we know. If you set clear guidelines about what's acceptable in your class and what constitutes cheating, you can consider a GPT disclosure policy. In my class, I say you can use GPT, but you have to say how you used it. The students are required to disclose when they use GPT, and that's required for every paper. I explain to students why cheating is a problem, not just ethically, but also practically, because if you enter a world and if you're entering a world with GPT, and if GPT can do the assignment better than you can, then the employers have no reason to hire you instead of just having GPT do it on the cheap. So you need to be able to do better than GPT. And if you are cheating using GPT, it's going to hurt your own life outcomes. You also want to be a role model of integrity that you want your students to emulate. You may have noticed that in these slides, I tell you where I got my images, that they came from GPT. I tell you when I use GPT to help me. And that's because if students understand that, then they become more understanding of what the norms are. The third thing is the importance of authentic assessments, which is going back to this. The real world, students will have access to GPT. And so we should teach them how to be effective while using GPT. We want to prepare them for the world they're going to live in. And in the world they're going to live in, they're going to be writing memos with GPT. And so training them on how to do that effectively, as opposed to saying, here's how you write a memo without GPT. Now go into a world where everyone's using GPT and you don't know what you're doing because you don't know how to prompt engineer. That's not good for our students. That's not good for society. We're much better off if we can train people how to use it effectively, and then also train them how to be, to show academic integrity while they use it. So a lot of people are freaked out about academic integrity in AI. I don't think it's a new problem. I don't think anything has really changed in terms of academic integrity. The best ways to deal with academic integrity are to teach your students to do it, not to try to enforce. Not that you shouldn't try to enforce, but that on its own has never been enough. All right, so summing everything up, AI has made a lot of strides in the past year, and 2 years and 3 years and 5 years. It's just going so fast, it's hard to keep up. New advances are occurring every week, but this isn't something to fear. It's an opportunity to be better. We can do better pedagogy than has ever been done in human history, and that's really impressive and exciting. The future involves AI, so you can be sure that you're helping your students be part of that future. Students don't naturally know how to use AI. Nobody does. It's a new thing. But with the right scaffolding, we can help students learn how to use AI better, and that will make our teaching more effective and our students more effective and everybody happier. On that note, I would like to just, shameless self-promotion. This is my psychology comic book introduction. It's a graphic novel intro psych book. If you're interested in comic books, you're interested in psychology, or you're interested in unusual ways of pedagogy, check it out. And aside from that, I think I'm going to close this off now and open to questions if there are any. That's not what's supposed to happen. Screen share, stop share. There we go.
Thank you, Professor. That was a great presentation, and I think we can all find a point of interaction with what you have mentioning. We have a few more questions here. I think the most recurring one is related to the materials, including, for example, the questions that you ask for the GPT. So the material that you use for to train the students and to train the AI that you have been mentioning, are they available?
Yeah, and so I can give you any of my materials. Just send me an email. It's Oppenheimer, my last name, at cmu.edu, cmu.edu, Carnegie Mellon, that's my thing. So you can also Google me, and I'm happy to send any of my materials that I've used. I can probably set you up with a practice account on the Socratic books. It may take a little longer for me to do that, but we have, if you're interested in just trying it, we could set you up with that. And so, yeah, anything that anyone is interested in that I didn't have time to go through, I'm happy to engage with you and send you what materials I have.
Great. We have another question, and it's related to the Socratic book, and that many people consider that is very interesting idea. How would you approach this Socratic book into a more advanced course, where the knowledge is kind of more limited for the student, and the resources are too wide?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If there are two types of classes, I guess, so you could probably break it up in many nuanced ways, but you have classes where you would have textbooks, and then you'd have classes where textbooks are no longer appropriate because it's too advanced. A Socratic book can be used in lieu of or in addition to as a supplement to any textbook, and that's fine. We've actually been exploring the use of this in classrooms where there are no textbooks. It's actually all primary sources. They're reading articles, etc. And what we do is we put those articles into the Socratic book, and we then give a list of guiding questions that we want students to get out of it. And students will use that to help. So we've done this specifically in philosophy classes, where we'll give them like an actual Kant reading, and then we'll have a couple of guiding questions, and students will interact and engage with the Socratic book about the reading. And what we found is that students come to class better prepared because they understand the reading better than they did when they didn't have access to something to ask questions about the reading with. And so that can actually help. Again, it scaffolds them, right? So right now, they could try to do the reading on their own, which they may or may not be able to do depending on their level. They can just ask GPT on their own to summarize the reading, but then it's not scaffolded. Or we can do some combination where we say, okay, do the reading and then ask GPT questions in a Socratic book format, where the professor has given guiding questions and given structures and constraints on what sorts of things the LLM is allowed to give back to the students. Now, in this case, we have from various professors feedback saying, I've noticed my students are more prepared for class. I noticed that we have better discussions. But what I don't have is any sort of measurement of outcome. And the reason I don't is because, unlike textbooks, old articles don't usually come with a test bank. And so I don't have a natural, fair set of questions to ask. And so I don't have any good evidence of this aside from sort of qualitative responses of faculty who have tried it. But the point I'm trying to make that I think is a broader point than the Socratic book specifically, because I'm not selling the Socratic book. I'm not a textbook company. It's more about the fact that you can use LLMs, and if students just try to do it on their own, the answers they get are really bad, and oftentimes, they're not nuanced, and they get confused. And so using software that's going to exist soon if it doesn't already, but also just teaching your students how to query with the right sorts of questions, LLMs, is actually really the way to go. The students don't naturally know how to. But if we can guide them in the right direction with the right sorts of guides or guiding questions, then they can start using LLMs and be much more effective. And that's particularly true in large classes. I mean, if you're in a class of 15 students, then you can help them understand what questions to ask and how to go about learning the material. But if you're in a class of 150 and you can't do one-on-one Socratic learning, then it's really great to have some sort of system. It's better than what you would be able to do otherwise. And it can actually be really helpful.
Yeah, great. We have another question related to, and I think this can be applied not only to faculty, because the question is praised on faculty, but I think in any job, based on the AI, the support that can provide to faculties and can provide in many jobs right now. Do you think would be possible that AI at some point, or probable that faculty will take more tasks, more teaching load, and by extension, reducing the hiring of new faculties?
So this is a political question at the end of the day, right? In my dream world, the AI takes tasks that would take time for faculty, and the result is that the faculty have more time to focus on the things that really matter, whether that be teaching, whether that be other research, whether that be mentoring, the things that faculty do really well. Um, and in my dream world, that's what we would do, is we would say, okay, we can take away answering questions about the syllabus, which is not something you really need a faculty member to do. And instead, the faculty member can then provide really good, has more free time to work with students on things that matter. In reality, I totally can imagine a school saying this is a great way to reduce our costs of salary, and reduce how many salary we have to hire, because, hey, we've just freed up the salary from answering questions on the syllabus. Now they can teach another class, and so we don't need another faculty member. At the end of the day, any tool that makes us more efficient has a risk of meaning that the administrators do the wrong thing. I would call that the wrong thing. At the same time, I mean, this is going to get me in trouble. I know this is being recorded. I know it's going to eventually end up online. But we don't need to pay faculty salaries to have faculty answer questions about syllabi. It's below our pay grade, right? We are more expert than that, and we shouldn't be paying faculty. I mean, student tuition dollars and taxpayer support, we shouldn't be paying faculty for our time to be going to stuff like that. If we're going to be paying someone with the expertise level of a faculty, the sorts of rates that we should be paying faculty, then the things we should be doing should be things that we can do uniquely well. And that's a political statement. I have no evidence to back it up. It's just where I stand. And I understand not everyone will agree with that. But at the same time, we can make ourselves valuable in so many ways. And I think if the university gets more value from what faculty do, because we're not wasting our time doing boring tasks that AI can do for us, then it makes it more productive for them to hire faculty. And if we can get that across to administrators, then maybe it will do the opposite of the problem. It'll make faculty so much more efficient in what we can do in terms of because efficiency comes in two sides, right? It's how much it costs and how much it produces. And if we can produce much more bang for every buck that is spent on us, then it actually can become a source of value to hire more faculty. It's not the way most administrators think, unfortunately, but I think it's the sort of way that we could try to ensure that administrators think by giving them those arguments.
I think many people are in the chat are interested on the implementing some of these ideas. And we have a set of recurring questions related to first, how do you handle or how was the institution handling the the permissions that you may need to use a book for training this specific textbook to training in a specific AI. And what tools do you recommend, for example, in case that a faculty want to employ their own syllabus, and how do they make it, also making sure that the university policies are respected in
Yeah,
all these matters?
it's a fabulous question. I can't speak to what the University of Minnesota's policies are, and so it's a little hard for me to answer those because I'm not at Minnesota. I will say, with the textbook company, I was able to get permissions from the textbook company, which is why I have to redact its name. But because they were interested in testing how their books would do. We did not feed the textbook itself to our model. The textbook doesn't have the textbook. The Socratic bot has never read the book. It has only read articles that are public domain. And um, and so, there are university policies about what we can do with student information. And so we will often, we have things behind various firewalls. We use tech support. I am hedging here. And the reason I'm hedging is because I'm a little concerned that many people who are in this room right now don't necessarily have the sort of technical experience to be able to implement some of the things I was about to say. And I don't want to get lost in the weeds. I will say that everything I talked about, there are commercial products that are under development, not by me, but by Microsoft, by Google, by OpenAI. All of them are currently working on off-the-shelf products that will do these things. I'm a little bit ahead of the curve because I like doing these sorts of things myself, and so I'm working with people in the tech office to develop them. But all of the big companies are going to be putting these sorts of things out, and so I guess what I would think of now is something simple like the intervention that I talked about first, where you can implement it in your class, where you just tell students, there are plenty of models online that are free that people can use, and just like take what you're writing and ask it to tell you what's wrong with your argument. And then don't just accept what's wrong with your argument, fight back. And sometimes it's going to be right. And you're like, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's a great idea." But sometimes it's going to be wrong, and don't accept it as truth. And just telling them to do that, we saw really nice gains in the quality of argumentation and in the quality of their prompt engineering. They started out with getting LLMs were giving bad arguments back to them, and LLMs started giving better arguments, and they were giving better arguments to the LLMs, and the quality of the dialogue got better over the course of the semester. And we were just using free off-the-shelf LLMs for that purpose. Um, if you want to get more sophisticated, you will probably have to get into the weeds a little more, but I don't think this is the right venue for me to go into the sort of technical specifications. But if you send me an email, I can see what I can do.
Yeah. So we also have a few more questions related to how does through the review process that, for example, in the first example where you explain assignment 1 to assignment 5 and the student, how do you make sure that the data or the information that provided to the students by the LLM is actually accurate, or is something that?
We don't. In
Oh,
fact, that's one of the things we grade them on. So we in our actual, if you were to see my actual assignment, one of the things we say is LLMs don't always give accurate information. When the LLM gives you information and argues against you, it will be citing various information. You should double check it. And if you accept the LLM's information and it's wrong, we'll deduct points from you. And so we teach the students to double check the LLMs as part of their grade. And this goes back to prompt engineering too. Good prompt engineering can, to a large degree, mitigate the problem of hallucinations because it is possible to give a prompt that involves the LLM checking itself and reduces the likelihood of LLM of hallucinations. And we start seeing students gain the sophistication to get better answers from LLMs that way. Look, the class is not about LLMs. Like that's not what I teach. It's a class on human intelligence and stupidity. It's a intro psychs decision science course. We have one assignment that includes it, and we see these huge gains. There are very few classes out there on how to use LLMs effectively. There may be those under development in a variety of places, but just incorporating that into your everyday classwork is really helpful for students. And we're starting to see that LLMs can hinder education if they're not scaffolded properly, but they can really help too. So we should be trying to get students to know how to do it so that they can be lifelong learners without our scaffolding for them. They can scaffold themselves.
we have, do you have a plan, or the project have a plan to divulge this information about, for example, the results that are coming out of the use of the Socratic book, or how this
Yeah.
was implemented as an open source method, or is have a specific project?
No, so we're basically combining it. Okay, for those of you who are not into the weeds, I apologize for what I'm about to say. But basically what we have is we take we can use any LLM. So we have actually a toggle where you can switch between, and the instructor can switch between uh, GPT, Claude, Gemini, etc. And so you can send your answers to any of those. Um, and then we basically have a front with a RAG bot that we have uploaded certain articles to, and we programmed the bot to start with looking at those articles before being willing to engage with the general LLM. And so that's sort of the approach that we take. And we also have a thing that students can input information about themselves if they would like to the LLMs, which are then incorporated, sent to the LLM, it's to our Socratic book. So if they say, I really like Disney movies, then it'll give Disney movie examples. Or if it says, I like hearing about anecdotes, please tell your examples in the form of anecdotes, or I like bullet points, or I like short answers, or I like long. Students can constrain the LLM in that way. Um, so those are the sort of primary things. The other thing, of course, we do is a lot of fine tuning, where we get answers back and we've tested it, and we have our research assistants and our TAs and even our students giving feedback, which we then incorporate into future iterations.
I think we have time for one more question. And do in your experience with the student, do you suggest the student to test more than one, for example, more than one model, that is Gemini, GPT, or whatever, also validated with open source, other open sources, or do you usually stick during the project to a specific
So
one?
I think that different LLMs are better or worse at different things. And as a result of that, it's often very useful to test multiple LLMs and see which ones are giving you the best um, responses that you want. And also LLMs change over time. As new models are released, and even within models, they get better or worse depending on various training set information. So it's definitely useful to be constantly testing different models and seeing what is good and what is bad for different purposes. Um, and we don't, in our actual intervention that I talked about at the beginning, we don't force them to use multiple LLMs and like compare the different models and what they say in terms of feedback. Um, because the point of that assignment, it's not meant to be a long assignment. They write a 300-word statement, they stick it into an LLM, they write a 300-word rebuttal. We're not hoping that they're going to spend a lot of hours working on that. It's meant to be a quick assignment that they can do, just a homework assignment, really. Um, but of course, you could modify everything. As I said at the beginning, everything has to be modified. It all is about your goals, your class, your content, your student, your population. Um, you're going to want to modify it to fit what works for you. And there may be assignments for which it makes no sense whatsoever to allow students to use LLMs at all, because the content is something they need to know independent of having LLM training. And there may be assignments that it is possible that really you want the students to almost fully offload it to LLMs, because the point is about training them to use LLMs effectively. It all depends on the specifics. And I know that's a little unsatisfying, but that's at the end of the day, I can give you big, vague, general advice that's wrong, or I can give you, advice on the fact that there are certain things that are really context dependent, and education is context dependent. And so, you're all experts at what you do. So use LLMs, but use your expertise when adopting LLM strategies.
We are running out of time, and for everybody, this is gonna be recorded and shared with you. But I would like to ask this final question. This is going to be my last question. I'm sorry, because I think it's my opinion, I think it's relevant. So in your perspective, what kind of collaboration between groups like STEM and liberal arts can help to develop an AI or a platform that somehow can support the advance of learning between students?
Oh yeah, I mean, you're going to want to have interactions between STEM and liberal arts on every element, right? I mean, at the very least, very few liberal arts faculty are really advanced at understanding how LLMs work and how to program them and such. And so they're going to want to work with STEM colleagues to create models that will help them in their classrooms. But also, um, the STEM professors oftentimes, some of them are expert pedagogues, but some of them, they would really benefit from understanding how, how liberal arts colleagues think about various content. I have a good example of this. I have a colleague who teaches a class that involves basically data mining and scraping from the web. And he told me 5 to 6 years ago, he had both humanists and computer scientists, data scientists working in his class. And 5 years ago, computer scientists dominated this class, that they had the programming skills that really allowed them to be effective at scraping the web and coming up with interesting answers to their questions. Since ChatGPT came out, the humanists are now dominating because the humanists are asking GPT to help them develop the code for web scraping, and the humanists are asking more interesting questions. And so the advantage that the computer scientists have on coding is no longer the sort of advantage it used to be. And the ability to ask interesting, meaningful questions about the human condition, that's what really drives forward things. I mean, I have before many times said something. Someone asked me once if AI was smarter than humans or if humans were smarter than AI. And I said, well, AI is sort of like a hammer. If a hammer helps us nail in a nail, but if a human's not using it, it's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. Without a human giving it prompts, an AI is just sitting there waiting for something to happen. And humanists can ask really interesting questions, and STEM students can too, but they benefit from the humanist perspective. And so the combination of STEM and humanist is increasingly valuable, with the STEM having the technical skills to get AI to create the right AIs to do things, and the humanists helping develop the right way to what we want to be probing.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Oppenheimer. I'm sorry for all the questions that we couldn't answer. We are going to share the recording, and if you have more questions, please feel free to reach DSI or Dr. Oppenheimer directly with any specific that you have. I hope everybody have a great time. I think we are going to stop recording now.
Here's